The deportation notice trembled in Natalie's hands as she stood outside the immigration office, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. 3 days. She had 3 days before they would put her on a plane back to a life she'd fought so hard to escape. Her fingers cramped around the crumpled paper, and for a moment, the bustling Seoul street around her seemed to close in, suffocating her with the weight of her failure. She'd come here to build something, to prove she could make it on her own terms, and now it was all slipping away like sand through her fingers. The city that had promised her freedom was about to become her prison, and then her past. A black luxury sedan glided past her, its tinted windows reflecting her defeated expression. Inside, unseen by her desperate eyes, a man with sharp features and even sharper eyes watched her through the glass. His phone buzzed with reports of territory disputes and million-dollar deals, but his gaze lingered on the woman crumbling on the sidewalk. He made a mental note. Then the car disappeared into traffic, leaving Natalie alone with her catastrophe. 3 months earlier, Natalie had been full of hope despite the odds stacked against her. She worked as a project creator for a mid-sized marketing firm, the kind of place that loved to tout diversity in their hiring brochures, but treated her like a quota to be filled rather than a person with ideas. Her cubicle was in the corner, deliberately isolated from the rest of the creative team. She'd learned to ignore the whispered comments in Korean that her coworkers thought she couldn't understand, the way they'd talk over her in meetings, or how her suggestions would be dismissed only to be praised when Jung-ho from accounting repeated them verbatim 20 minutes later. But Natalie was nothing if not resilient. She'd grown up fighting, and she wasn't about to stop now. Every morning she arrived an hour early, perfecting presentations that would be credited to others. Every night she left an hour late, double-checking work that her supervisor would barely glance at. The apartment she could barely afford was tiny, a shoebox in a neighborhood where the buildings leaned into each other like tired old men. Her bed sat directly on the floor, her clothes hung on a rack from a discount store, and her meals consisted primarily of convenience store kimbap and instant ramyeon. Her room was modest. She was surviving, barely, but surviving nonetheless. The visa expiration had crept up on her like a thief in the night. She'd known it was coming, had told herself she'd handle it, but between the demanding job and the crushing loneliness in another country that both fascinated and alienated her, she'd let the deadline slip too close. When the first notice came, she panicked. When the second came, she begged. By the third, she was desperate enough to consider anything. It was Mrs. Kim at the immigration office who'd whispered it, her voice low and cautious, eyes darting to make sure no one was listening. "There is one way," the older woman had said, her wrinkled hands sliding Natalie's rejected paperwork across the desk. "Marriage to a Korean citizen. It's not illegal if it's real, or if it looks real enough." The words had hung in the air between them, heavy with implication and impossible possibility. Natalie had left that office with her mind racing, her heart pounding with an idea so ridiculous it just might work. She needed a husband. Not a real one, just someone willing to play the part long enough to save her life. The universe, in its strange sense of humor, delivered him the very next day. Woo Jin appeared at her office carrying a package, dressed in the navy blue uniform and a coverall of a delivery service, a cap pulled low over his eyes. Natalie barely noticed him at first. She was hunched over her desk, trying to hold back tears after her supervisor had publicly shredded her latest campaign proposal, calling it uninspired and culturally tone-deaf in front of the entire team. The humiliation burned in her chest, mixing with the fear of deportation into a toxic cocktail of despair. "Delivery for Park Ji-won," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly gentle. When no one else moved to help him, Natalie stood, directing him to the appropriate desk. He thanked her with a small nod, and that's when their eyes met. His were dark and assessing, seeing too much in that brief moment. He noticed the redness around her eyes, the way her hands shook slightly as she pointed across the office, but he said nothing, just delivered the package and turned to leave. Wait! The word burst from Natalie's lips before she could stop it. He paused, turning back with one eyebrow slightly raised. The office had gone quiet, everyone pretending not to watch, while absolutely watching. Natalie felt her face burn, but she pushed forward. I need help. I know this is insane and you don't know me, but I'm desperate. I'm about to be deported, and I heard that marriage to a Korean citizen could help, and I know this is crazy, but I can pay you. Not much, but something every month, and it would only be temporary, just until my papers are settled, and then we can divorce quietly and you'd never have to see me again. The words tumbled out in a rush, each one feeling more absurd than the last. She waited for him to laugh, to walk away, to call her crazy. Instead, he studied her with those intense dark eyes, and she felt like he was reading every secret she'd ever kept.
How much can you pay? He asked finally, his tone businesslike. 50,000 won a month, she said, knowing it was pathetic, knowing it wasn't enough. I know it's not a lot, but it's all I can afford and still eat, and you don't have to worry. I will cook for you and do the very best I can for you, and I will always answer whenever you call. He was silent for a long moment, and Natalie felt her last hope dying. Then he said, okay. She blinked. Okay? I'll do it, but we do this properly. We date first, make it look real. Immigration will investigate. If they think it's fake, we both get in trouble. Natalie could hardly believe what she was hearing. You're serious? You'll actually do this? I'm serious. He pulled out his phone. Give me your number. We'll meet tomorrow and discuss details. As he walked away, delivery bag slung over his shoulder, Natalie realized she didn't even know his name. But she had hope again, and right then, that was enough. The dating began awkwardly. Woo Jin picked her up after work in his modest delivery bike that had seen better days, taking her to small restaurants where they sat across from each other like strangers playing at intimacy. He asked her questions about her life, her family, her dreams. She answered honestly, surprised by how easy he was to talk to despite the strange circumstances of their arrangement. Why did you come to Korea? He asked one evening over bibimbap at a tiny restaurant in Hongdae. I wanted to prove I could make it somewhere different, she said, mixing her rice with more force than necessary. Everyone back home said I was crazy, said I should stay where it's comfortable, where I know the rules. But comfortable wasn't enough. I wanted more than just existing. It's not like it even better back home, but I try my best anywhere I see myself. And now? Now I'm fighting to stay in a place that doesn't really want me, doing a job that doesn't respect me, and I've literally had to buy a husband just to survive. She laughed, but it was bitter. Pretty pathetic, right? No, he said firmly. It's brave, beautiful, stupid maybe, but brave. She looked up, startled by the sincerity in his voice. Thanks, I think. You're welcome. He smiled then, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to devastatingly attractive. Natalie felt something flutter in her chest and immediately pushed it down. This was business, nothing more. They signed the marriage documents on a Tuesday afternoon in a government office that smelled of old paper and broken dreams. Woo Jin wore a simple black suit that somehow made him look more expensive than the situation warranted. Natalie wore a dress she'd bought on sale, her hands trembling as she signed her name next to his. Kim Woo Jin. That was his name, officially now hers too. Once your papers are done, we quietly separate, he said as they left the building, now legally bound. No drama, no complications. Agreed, Natalie said, trying to ignore the unexpected pang of sadness at his words. What she didn't know was that the man walking beside her, the supposed delivery driver who'd agreed to marry her for 50,000 won a month, was the same man who'd watched her from the back of a luxury sedan. Kim Woo Jin wasn't a delivery driver. That was merely a disguise, a way to move through the city unseen, to observe and gather information without drawing attention. His real life existed in the shadows of Seoul's glittering skyline, in boardrooms where billions changed hands with a nod, in underground networks where his word was law and his anger meant death. At night, while Natalie slept in their modest apartment, believing her husband was working late shifts, Woo Jin transformed. The delivery uniform gave way to custom Italian suits. The modest sedan became a fleet of black luxury vehicles. Men twice his age bowed when he entered rooms, their eyes carefully averted in respect or fear or both. He controlled construction contracts, shipping routes, entertainment districts, and information networks that spanned East Asia. Politicians took his calls. Police looked the other way. Rivals disappeared. But every morning, he returned to their small apartment, changing back into his delivery clothes, making coffee for his unknowing wife before she woke. The workplace sabotage began subtly when they realized that she got married to a poor delivery guy. Natalie's latest project, a campaign for a major electronics company, was her chance to finally prove herself. She'd worked for weeks on the proposal, refining every detail, anticipating every question. But the day before the big presentation, someone had deleted half her files and replaced her carefully designed graphics with corrupted images. "What happened?" her supervisor demanded, his face red with anger as Natalie frantically tried to explain. "This is completely unprofessional." "Someone sabotaged my files," she protested, but even to her own ears it sounded like an excuse. "Figure it out," he snapped. "You have until tomorrow morning or you're off the project." Natalie worked through the night, rebuilding everything from memory and backup files she'd fortunately kept. At 3 a.m, she was slumped over her laptop in their apartment when Woo Jin came home, still in his delivery uniform, though his eyes carried the exhaustion of entirely different work. "What are you doing awake?" he asked, setting down his bag. "Saving my job," she muttered, not looking up from the screen. "Someone deleted my presentation. I have to rebuild it by morning." He moved behind her, looking at the screen over her shoulder. "You're good at this," he observed, studying her designs. "Tell that to my supervisor," she said bitterly. "Nothing I do is ever good enough." "It will be," he said with strange certainty. "Sleep for a few hours. You'll think more clearly." She wanted to argue, but her eyes were burning. "Just 2 hours," she conceded. When she woke, she found small corrections made to her work, improvements so subtle she almost didn't notice them, but they elevated everything. She looked at Woo Jin, who was making breakfast as if nothing had happened. You must have done it before you fell asleep," he said smoothly, not meeting her eyes. "You're more talented than you think." The presentation was a massive success. The clients loved it. Her supervisor looked shocked, and her coworkers' poorly hidden resentment confirmed what Natalie had suspected. They'd been trying to sabotage her. What she didn't know was that the CEO of the electronics company had received a phone call the night before. A phone call from Kim Woo Jin, who'd suggested they might find the upcoming presentation very interesting. The CEO, who owed Woo Jin several favors of the kind that couldn't be refused, had ensured his team came prepared to be impressed. More successes followed. Contracts that should have gone to senior team members landed on Natalie's desk. Supervisors who'd ignored her suddenly sought her opinions. She was confused but grateful, attributing it to finally catching a break. She didn't see the invisible hand guiding her career upward, smoothing obstacles, ensuring her success. The fake marriage began to feel disturbingly real. Coming home to Woo Jin became the highlight of Natalie's day. They fell into domestic routines, cooking dinner together, watching terrible reality shows, talking about everything and nothing. He was surprisingly easy to live with, clean and considerate, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. One evening, while making kimchi jjigae together, she asked him about his family. "I don't have much family left," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "My parents died when I was young. I've been on my own for a long time." "I'm sorry," she said, touching his arm without thinking. He looked at her hand, then at her face, and something passed between them, electric and undeniable. "What about you?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. "My family thinks I'm crazy for being here," she admitted. "They don't understand why I'd leave everything familiar, but I couldn't stay where everyone had already decided who I was supposed to be. Sometimes the people who know us longest understand us least," he said, and she nodded, feeling seen in a way she hadn't in years. The almost kiss happened on a rainy Tuesday. They'd been caught in a downpour walking home from the market, both soaked and laughing as they stumbled into the apartment. Natalie's hair was plastered to her face, and Woo Jin reached out to brush it back, his fingers lingering on her cheek. They stood there, dripping on the floor, the air between them charged with possibility. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, softly, tentatively, and then with growing urgency. His hands tangled in her wet hair, hers gripped his soaked shirt, and for a moment, nothing else existed. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back. This was supposed to be fake. This was supposed to be temporary. They weren't supposed to feel like this. We shouldn't... I know, Woo Jin said, but he didn't let her go. They didn't talk about it, they didn't define it, but something had shifted and neither could pretend otherwise. The casual touches became more frequent. The way he looked at her changed, heated and possessive. The way she defended him to her coworkers, spoke about her husband with unconscious pride, revealed feelings she hadn't meant to develop. Then the threats began. It started with immigration officers showing up at her workplace, asking questions, looking for inconsistencies. Then strange men began appearing in places they shouldn't be, watching her with cold eyes. Her apartment building's security footage showed people loitering in ways that made her skin crawl. She was being followed, investigated, threatened. Natalie panicked. What if they find out? She asked Woo Jin one night, pacing their small living room. What if they realize it started as fake? We'll both go to jail and then I'll be deported anyway, but I just hope this doesn't happen. That won't happen, he said calmly, too calmly. How can you be so sure? Because I won't let it. There was something in his voice, an authority that didn't match his delivery persona. She stopped pacing, really looking at him. He sat relaxed in their cheap armchair, but his eyes held the kind of confidence that came from real power, not false bravado. Woo Jin, who are you really? Your husband, he said simply. But Natalie was done with evasions. The immigration officer stopped coming. The men watching me disappeared overnight. My career suddenly skyrocketed after years of going nowhere. Contracts fall into my lap like magic. And you're never worried about anything, like you know it'll all work out. She moved closer, her voice dropping. What aren't you telling me? He stood, and she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Some things are better not knowing. That's not good enough anymore. They stood there, the truth hanging between them like a blade. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and his expression hardened into something cold and dangerous, something she'd never seen before. I have to go, he said, already moving toward the door. It's 11 at night. Where? Work emergency, something to deliver, you know. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. But he didn't change into his delivery uniform. He grabbed a black bag from the closet he'd never seen him open, and when he turned back to kiss her forehead goodbye, she caught a glimpse of something that made her blood freeze. A gun nestled in a shoulder holster he was strapping on like it was routine. Woo Jin? Her voice came out small, frightened. Lock the door behind me, he said, and then he was gone. Natalie couldn't sleep. She paced the apartment, her mind racing. Who carried guns to work emergencies? What kind of delivery driver owned a weapon? At 2 a.m, she made a decision. She opened her laptop and typed his name into the search bar. Kim Woo Jin. Common enough that thousands of results appeared. She added Seoul and hit enter. The first result made her blood run cold. Kim Woo Jin, CEO of Daehan Industries, expands empire into construction sector. There was a photo. Her husband, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, shaking hands with a government minister. She kept reading, falling down a rabbit hole of articles, each more shocking than the last. Mysterious mogul Kim Woo Jin acquires majority stake in entertainment giant. Billionaire Kim Woo Jin's underground connections under investigation, charges dropped. The king of Seoul's shadows, Kim Woo Jin's rise to power. Billionaire, mogul, mafia lord, the words swam before her eyes. The man she'd offered 50,000 won a month to marry her was worth billions. The man she'd pitied for his humble delivery job controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. The man she'd fallen in love with had been lying to her since the moment they met. She was still sitting there, frozen in shock, when he came home at dawn. He stopped in the doorway, seeing her laptop, seeing her face, and knew immediately that she knew. "Natalie, don't." She held up a hand, her voice shaking. "Just don't. I don't even know what to call you. Woo Jin? CEO Kim? The king of Seoul's shadows?" She laughed, slightly hysterical. "I offered you 50,000 won. 50,000 won to one of the richest men in Korea? You must have thought I was hilarious." "I never thought that," he said, moving closer. She stood, backing away. "My career? The immigration problems disappearing? Everything. It was you. You were manipulating my entire life." "I was protecting you." His voice rose, frustration breaking through his usual calm. "You were alone in a country that treated you like garbage, working for people who would never value you, about to be deported back to a life you hated. Yes, I helped. Yes, I used my influence, and I'd do it again. You should have told me." "When?" he challenged. "When you were crying in desperation outside the immigration office? When you were so grateful that a delivery driver agreed to marry you? When you started looking at me like I was something precious instead of terrifying?" He ran a hand through his hair, and she saw the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried. "I liked being just Woo Jin with you, not CEO Kim, not the Mafia lord, not the man people fear. Just the man you might actually choose if you knew the truth." "But I didn't know the truth." Tears ran down her face. "How can I trust anything between us when it was all built on lies?" "Not lies," he said fiercely, closing the distance between them. "Everything I felt was real. Every moment we shared, every conversation, every time I came home to you, that was real, Natalie. The only real thing in my entire constructed life." She wanted to push him away. She wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed. But looking into his eyes, she saw the truth of his words. She'd been falling in love with him, and he'd been falling right back, both of them terrified by feelings that weren't supposed to exist. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't be with someone whose life involves guns and underground networks and billion-dollar deals I don't understand." "Then I'll walk away from it." His words shocked them both. "If that's what you need, I'll walk away from all of it. The company, the networks, everything. Just don't walk away from me." "You don't mean that." "Try me." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I've spent my whole life building an empire, becoming someone powerful enough that no one could ever hurt me again. But none of it means anything compared to this, compared to you." She needed time to think, to process all of this. "Take all the time you need," he said, "but know this, I love you. Not the woman I married out of obligation, not the employee I helped, not even the brave soul who propositioned a stranger in a hallway. I love you, Natalie, the real you, and that's the one thing I haven't lied about." She left, staying with a coworker for 3 days while she sorted through her emotions. He didn't call, didn't pressure her, but everything changed when the underworld of Kim Woo Jin came crashing on him. As one day Natalie was on her way home, she was abducted by Kim Woo Jin's rivals. Natalie was terrified as she was tied to a chair. All she could think of at that moment was Woo Jin, and all she had done for her even when he didn't need to. When Woo Jin learned of Natalie's abduction, he moves heaven and earth just to find her, which he did, in an abandoned subway under the city, as his rival Kang Lee made a demand for Woo Jin to step down as the Mafia boss. Woo Jin knew it would be a disaster to hand over the authority of the whole underworld to a tyrant man like Kang Lee. For years, people never knew what Woo Jin had been doing to make the city safe. Being the rift between the underworld mafia and the everyday daily world, he had been called a lot of things, but he still held on to his humanity. He was able to overpower Kang Lee with his men, and he fled. Woo Jin freed Natalie. Natalie understood everything and the kind of man Woo Jin is, but still questioned herself how she ended up in such a world. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" he asked as he was concerned. "No, I'm fine. All thanks to you for saving me," she said. After the rescue, Woo Jin took Natalie back to their modest apartment. Natalie stood outside their apartment building watching black luxury cars come and go, and the one that brought her back, seeing men in expensive suits bow to the man she'd married. She looked at Woo Jin's eyes. She walked toward him and he froze, hope and fear warring on his face. "I have conditions," she said when she reached him. "No more lies, ever. You tell me everything, the good and the ugly and the dangerous. Done. I'm not giving up my career. I don't care how much money you have. I'm not becoming some trophy wife. I wouldn't want you to. And if your life puts me in danger, I need to know. I need to be able to make informed choices. I swear it." She took a breath. "I love you too. The delivery driver, the CEO, the Mafia lord, all of it. Because somehow, despite everything, you're still just Woo Jin to me." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to earth. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning this," he murmured against her hair. "Earning you." "You already have," she said, and kissed him wholeheartedly. 6 months later, Natalie stood in the penthouse apartment that was now legally theirs, both their names on the deed, looking out over the Seoul skyline. Her career had continued to flourish, but now it was her talent alone, not hidden intervention. She'd been promoted to creative director, leading projects that made her proud. Woo Jin had gradually introduced her to his world, the legal businesses and the gray areas, trusting her with his secrets. Natalie understood that the underworld is not something that Woo Jin can just leave behind, but she accepted him anyway. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when his phone rang with problems she couldn't help with, times when the darkness of his world touched their lives. But they faced it together. No more lies, no more pretending. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Regrets?" he asked. She thought about the terrified woman who'd stood outside the immigration office, about the desperate proposal in a hallway, about all the twists that had brought them here. "Not a single one," she said, turning in his arms to kiss the man she'd accidentally married and deliberately chosen to love. Outside, the city glittered with possibility, and inside, they'd found something rarer than wealth or power. They'd found home in each other. Dear viewers, what do you think about this story? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed the story, give us a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and share it with friends. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest updates. Thanks, and see you in the next video. Bye.